When I came to America as a refugee, I didn't speak English. But the one thing that I could rely on is body language. And so for the next 5 decades, I studied nonverbal communications. And that's what I hope to share with you.
So today my name is Nadia Eid. I am co-founder and CEO of Body Language Academy. This is David Steven. He is a partner and senior mentor on the program. And then we have the one and only world-leading body language expert, Joe Navarro, also best-selling author. He will be answering all of your, or as many questions as we can get through today. I will be following the live feed, and also I've looked through all of the questions that you have sent in beforehand. We are very excited about that. Yes.
Thanks, Nadia. And I'm coming from Australia. We've got a bit of an international mix here. I'm coming from Australia. Nadia is joining us in Denmark. And of course, Joe, you're coming to us from Florida. How are you? How are you today?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. As you know, it was touch and go there whether we would be able to get together today. But I'm glad we're all together. I'm glad everything is working, and I'm glad so many people could join us. We look forward to these events because it gives us a great opportunity to share our knowledge and our experience in this wonderful area of nonverbals. And if you haven't noticed by now, especially this year, how much more we are dependent on the study of body language. I get messages every day. In fact, all three of us get messages every day about, I can't read people online, or, I don't see the same information. And I think for the first time, people are really realizing how important body language is, both to understand each other, but to also communicate effectively.
Yeah, that's great. And as Nadia mentioned, we've had lots of questions. Thank you for everyone that sent questions in prior to the webinar. We literally have dozens and dozens of questions. And we can already see some people posting questions as we kick off today. Apologize up front. There is, we could spend hours here and still not get through everybody's questions, but we're going to do our best to answer some of the key ones that have come up that people have already submitted, and ones that you're posting at the moment. So we thought we would start, Joe. A lot of people have been asking about virtual meetings and COVIDs and mask wearing and that sort of area. So to start with, we're going to have a very quick poll to get people involved, and I'll just post it now.
And I am seeing all of your questions. If possible, please type in which country you're from. That's always interesting, as we have people joining in from all over the world.
Yeah. And so you can see the poll there, and it's a question around how confident are you in presenting yourself online during teleconferencing, such as a Zoom meeting. And what are we talking about there? How you present yourself, your setup, and how you are interacting with others. Are you confident, which would be 10, or are you not confident, which would be a level 1? So please jump in and vote in that poll. We'd love to see how people are feeling about their ability to present in the Zoom world. And while people are doing that, Joe, I guess you're doing a lot of, you used to fly all around the world and do lots of presentations, but I guess these days you're doing more and more via Zoom as well. How are you finding that experience?
Well, I think the first few months of, the February, March, April of last year was a shock for everybody because, I was used to doing maybe 40 events worldwide. And so that was a change for me, but it was also a change for a lot of companies. It seems like a long time ago, but just a year ago, companies didn't know how we were going to have training. How are we going to mentor each other? How are we going to maintain, that collegial esprit de corps of the organization? How are we going to liaise with each other? And, and the shift eventually came to one of the platforms that we're on, which is Zoom. But that didn't take away the problem that quickly arose, and that is that most of us weren't hired to do a performance. We were hired to do a presentation, but the higher standard that quickly evolved was going from presenting to performing. And, you and I have discussed this many times, David, where you get on a Zoom call and some people are well lit, some people aren't, some people you can't hear them. Some are, too close to the camera, and so forth. And how to get people to engage from going to a room where maybe there's 2,500 people present, as I was used to now I'm talking to a tiny little camera, and my gestures have to go from way out here to here. And now I have to adopt everything that I've learned from actors, such as the need to slow down gestures in front of the camera, because anything that moves too fast is just too jittery, too dynamic for television. And just the fact that we have to have the right kind of lighting. So for instance, for doctors who are doing telemedicine, they need to have warmer color lights than, let's say, somebody else who's just doing a video cast where they can have the brighter lights, and it doesn't matter as much. The fact that we need better microphones, that the microphones that come with our devices just aren't good enough. They don't capture the lower ranges. And so this was a real eye-opener for a lot of people. And of course, a lot of people were saying, well, what about how we dress and how we gesture, and how do we know they're being honest? Had a company contact me and say, we do 5, 6, 7, 8 interviews of candidates before they're hired, but those used to be live. We used to even fly them in, but now, how do we do that when we can only see the face and we can't see the hand? So it's been a real challenge. I think it'll continue to be a real challenge because, as Nadia and I were talking yesterday, the future is going to be a hybrid. And in some organizations, we're going to continue to see the Zoom get-togethers and so forth. And in others, where there's a high degree of mentoring and innovation that's required, you're going to have more face-to-face meetings. But the one thing we know is we're not going back. We're not going back to the way it was before in its totality. But now we realize the importance of body language. And then how do I convey, let's say you're in HR or you're a manager, how do I convey interest, warmth, caring, empathy over this virtual environment? And that is it's a challenge, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, let's share the results of the survey. I'll bring that up now. Share results. And so you can see there that, it varies, but the average is sort of 7, which is reasonably, confident, I guess, in the big scheme of things in terms of how people are feeling, which perhaps reflects the fact that people are doing this a lot more often.
Yeah. Well, when we did this the first time, if you remember, David, the numbers were way different. The numbers, when we did this the first time, there was something like in the aggregate, about 60% or more of people felt uncomfortable with video conferencing. And now that over time, we see the numbers getting better and better and better. But I dare say, if we ask people to raise their hand and say, how many of you have been on a Zoom call where there's more than 6 or 8 people? And there's always that one person that the image isn't right, the sound isn't right, the color isn't right, there's still a lot of factors there. And when we ask people, did you pick up on that behavior? Did you miss that? Did you catch that? It's interesting that, we, the professionals, when we look at it, we pick up on things that people are missing. And those little things that people are missing, those are critical. Those are critical because, this is part of what the Body Language Academy teaches, is that, yeah, it's easy if somebody raises their hand or coughs or, it's blatant, you can see it. But, what happens when you're in a meeting and, there's jaw shifting? What happens if all of a sudden there's ventilating behaviors? And, are we picking up on those little things, on the lip compression, on the lip pull? And then what do we do with that? What are we going to do with that critical information? Are we going to wait till the end of the conference? Or so it's, I appreciate self-reporting, but I think when we dig deep and we ask, are you picking up on those things? Are you picking on the fact that at one point my left shoulder rose significantly higher than my right one? And what is the justification for that? And if you're missing that in a meeting, especially in negotiations, shame on you. Because, we're all in the people business, but to a certain extent, we're not just paid to talk to each other or to write to each other. We're actually paid to observe each other. When you're negotiating, when you're evaluating a potential hire, when you are talking to someone else, unless it's for social reasons, part of that equation is how well you observe them. I was talking to Joshua Wise, who wrote a great book on real world negotiations at Harvard. And we were talking about the importance of body language in negotiations. And it's the one thing you can't do without, because, how do you figure out when to jump in, when to object, when to go silent, when to raise your eyebrow, when to demonstrate that there's an issue here? And we do that primarily non-verbally. So it's and this is why I think the course has been successful, is because for the first time, our parents taught us to look, but for the first time we're being taught how to observe. And there's a galactic difference between looking and observing. And those of us who fortunately have that capacity or have learned it along the way to observe, to break down and decode behavior, have such a tremendous advantage over others, because then we can make decisions more quickly, we can interact more quickly, but certainly we can move on more quickly because we've already gotten the message. And that's one of the advantages.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. And you make a really good point there. It is being a good observer is key, but it's also a skill and something that we can learn over time. So Nadia, let's go to you. What have we got coming in? Have you got any questions around this area that we can ask Joe now?
I certainly have. We've got a great question here from Tahira. I think she's from the US. How do you gain trust and build rapport while on Zoom business meetings?
Yeah, great question, and one that I saw increasing. Well, we all did on this call last year. One of the things that I'm often asked about is rapport building, and you can complicate rapport building, or you can simplify it. And as you know, I like to simplify things. How do we make people comfortable when they're around us? Well, we smile, we're collegial, we have a nice tone of voice. We tend to mirror each other. We're gracious. We agree. Usually we agree and add, or we agree with what they say. We nod and or acknowledge it, but then we say, well, could you look at it this way, and so forth. There's no big secret to rapport building online, but I think we make it more difficult because we're staring at a little button on a computer that we're not used to working with. And what we have to realize is, don't forget the basics. Don't forget that your voice matters, that cadence matters, that smiling matters, that arching the eyebrows when we greet each other matters, that holding ourselves quiet until the other person finishes speaking matters, that responding to questions immediately without a lot of contortions of the face, throat clearing, looking in every direction, those don't serve us well in conveying assurance and conveying authenticity and so forth. And in the end, it's about the information that our body is transmitting. Our species transmits in real time our sentiments. We don't wait 30 minutes later and go, oh, that food was terrible. No, we're eating it and we're making faces. We hear something we dislike and we're turning away from it. We cringe in real time. And so our bodies, we evolved to transmit information silently because for the last 200,000 years, we have been surrounded by predators, large felines. So we communicate quite exquisitely in real time, non-verbally, but we forget that. We forget that this is the principal means by which we can say to somebody else, hey, it's really good to see you, or that's a great idea, or I don't know, there may be an issue with that. There's the language, of course, but then there's the tone, what we call paralanguage, and then there's the body language. I have doubts. I have concerns. So it's just a matter of using what you normally use, but making sure that even though you're talking to a camera, that you continue to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Nadia, any other questions to follow on?
Here's one around virtual meetings. How do you best read people via a webcam? What specifically should you look for? Or
hopefully, yeah, no, good question. Hopefully their face isn't 2 inches away from the screen. You want to have enough space so that you can see at least the chest and the hands. Obviously, if we're too close, then we're very limited in what we can see. Always remember that the last 70 years of television has habituated us to where our faces should never be more than a fourth, certainly no more than a third of the screen. Anything closer than that, and we actually don't revile that. It doesn't settle well with us because we have been habituated by it. And so keeping that in mind, well, what can we see? Well, ideally, with enough lighting, you can see the eyes, you can see the glabella, which furrows when we have issues. You can see the lips fully when we compress them or bite them, the chin, of course, the neck, but especially the shoulders, right? Because you'll see, if somebody has doubts, they'll go, that kind of thing. But we know that the brain has a preference for seeing the hands. So we want to see the hands. And if this is all that we can get, then this is what we're going to have to go with. I've actually asked people could you sit a little bit further back because they were just so in my face that I just didn't want to look into their nostrils. So that's that's the new norm.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And how about people that join a meeting but don't turn on their cameras, Joe? Have you had many experiences like that? I know there was a question in the feed there, and
Yeah.
because every now and again,
No, I think, you know, when we first started making these Zoom calls, and obviously, you know, the more people that were engaged, the smaller the little squares began, and then with my eyesight, they began to disappear. And then I did an event, a virtual event in Milan, where there were 2,500 people in attendance, and of course, at that point, you know, you can't show all those people. So I've grown accustomed to people just blocking it. I have to say, some people object to that. I don't, because somebody, especially in my case, where I'm observing the whole room, I'm observing what everybody's doing. I'm checking on everybody's blink rate. I'm looking at how often they touch their face. I'm looking at what they're drinking. I'm looking at the Che Guevara poster behind them. I'm looking at everything. The last thing I want is the distractions. And, you know, it's okay if, you know, you're reaching for your cat, your son or daughter come into the room, by all means attend to it. So for me, I take no offense if they don't want to show their face.
I think sometimes people forget.
But I will tell you this: there is a benefit to showing our faces, because that's what we primarily have done for the last 200,000 years. And this is hardwired in our brains, that we get a lot of information from the face. I'm always astounded when I study children who are born blind. The first thing they want to do is they want to feel the face of the person that they're talking to, because they get information from that. Now, how would they know that if they've never seen? And yet, and this is, you know, this is why it's so exquisite. It's because it's in our DNA, that our faces convey not just something about our physiognomy, but also about our emotions. And even a blind child knows to assess it and where to go for it. It's not like they go, "Can I feel your shoulder?" They've never seen a shoulder. They want to feel the face, because that's what we're hardwired for.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think sometimes people also forget that showing themselves on screen is a chance for them to influence others through their own body language and how they're coming across. It's not just about reading others.
Exactly. If you think it's just about words, well, just send a memo. If you know, it's not just about words and tone of voice. It's, you know, how do you convey caring? How do you convey empathy?
Yeah.
How do you convey interest? If you think it's just words, I have bibliographies, rooms of books that will dissuade you of that.
All right, thanks, Joe. Nadia, we've probably got time for one more quick one before we move on to another topic.
Okay. You want to stay on the topic? We just had so many great questions. Someone asked, which part of the body gives most signals?
Yeah, let me consider that question. I would reframe that question. Our bodies transmit different information. Your face obviously transmits happiness, but so do your feet. Tell a child they're going to Disney World and watch those feet. They get happy feet. Watch a child that is shy or mournful and watch how the feet turn in, how the legs come together. Tell somebody that their purse is now missing, and watch the space between their fingers disappears. and the fingers curl up. So it's not about which signals the most. It's about what signals we can derive from different parts of the body. Because, for instance, your elbow doesn't blush, but your cheeks do, your neck does, your skin changes temperature in 1/50th of a second. The minute you hear something negative, your skin, if you tend to blush. So where would I look for that? Well, I would look for it in certain parts of the face, but there's other parts I wouldn't. You know, I know that when I see something exquisitely beautiful, my pupils will dilate. I have absolutely no control over it. And yet, if I see a threat, my pupils constrict so that the smaller aperture contributes to a longer focal point. So it really depends on what we want to derive from the communication, or what we're trying to observe. You know, some people, when they're under stress, they smoke more or they eat more. And some people do a lot of lip compressing when they're stressed. One of the things that I think you'll find, you know, and I think a lot of people are listening here or watching to see, well, you know, what does this academy teach? This academy teaches you how to break the whole body down to see, okay, what do we get from the forehead? What do we get from the ears? What do we get from the neck? What do we get from the feet? You know, I get all these people that, you know, sign up for these courses on that want to talk about micro expressions, but it's all facially focused, facial centered. But when you talk about, well, what about the feet? What about the hands? What about the knees? What does it mean when you put your hand in your pocket, but you leave your thumb out? Or you hang your thumbs in your pocket and you leave the fingers out? There's a big difference. The only way to understand the nuances of nonverbals, and to differentiate, by the way, those that are universal from those that are cultural, is to study them. You're not, these things you're not born with. There's certain things you're born with, you know, like how to smile and so forth. But the interpretation of these behaviors, that's what sets this academy apart. And that's why it's, you know, it's not something you can finish in an afternoon. It's not something you can finish, as you both know, because you're both mentors. It's something that takes weeks and months. But then when you come out, you're not the same person that when you went in. It's impossible. You see the world totally different.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Another big area we got a lot of questions around was baselines and how we sort of look at people sort of in that context. Nadia, have you got some questions that people have submitted around that baseline concept?
Yes, I've got Boris asking, Joe, how long does it take to establish a baseline of behavior?
All right. Those are very actually profound areas. So let's talk a little bit about baselines, because I'm while at the same time I am a champion of establishing baselines, I'm also well aware that some people have made it into something that they really shouldn't. You know, when I come into a museum and I see the top, you know, the statue of David, or the Virgin Mary holding the Jesus in her hands and so forth, I'm pretty sure I don't need baselines. You know, when you see two lovers both tilting their heads at a cafe, they're both sipping a coffee and they're not talking to each other. you know, let's chill out. We don't need a lot of baselines. We need baselines when we run into situations where perhaps because of the sudden change in environment, you know, you come into my office, I'm meeting you for the first time. I need to sort of figure out what you're all about. And that takes time. Now, the thing about baselines is, well, I don't know how long you're going to take to relax, because, you know, baselines, it's about being able to read people when they are at their most relaxed. Well, you know, and one of the things I learned in the FBI is the minute they came in the FBI office, they weren't going to relax. You know, you'd ask him, are you okay now? Yeah, I'm fine. No, you're not. No, you're not. Your blink rate is really high. You keep touching your neck. You're ventilating. All these things. Circumstances affect. The people in the room affect. You know, you want to get to an ideal to where you sort of come as close as you can to a relaxed situation. But the one thing I've learned is, you know, one of the things we learned from the Heisenberg principle is that if we intrusively look, it affects the experiment, and it applies to observation. If you've got 2 police officers or 1 FBI agent in a room, that person is going to be nervous. If they're breathing, they're going to be nervous. So what I look for is approximating, okay, having a nice conversation where I'm not creating any kind of stress. We're talking about just general things, high school, sports, anything else, and just try and get a good read on them. And then, you know, most people will reveal when there's psychological discomfort in some way. Now, some people, you see it a lot, like Hugh Grant, the actor, you see a lot of eyelid flutter. Yeah, some people, you'll see a lot of lip biting, jaw shifting. You collect that information, and then, you know, it's a matter of detailing. When I ask a question, how do they react to it when they hear the question, when they process the question, when they answer the question, and then when they do the post-answer reevaluation. Because a lot of people will say, yeah, I wasn't there. And then they think about it and they go, I wasn't there for very long. Okay. So they post-event evaluation. And so I look at the behaviors that are associated with that. But let's not turn, you know, the baselines into something that wears us down. Anytime you're intrusively observing, you're affecting baselines, and that's the bottom line. So just work with whatever you have. You know, when you only have a few minutes to, as in my case, where I only had a few minutes to access an intelligence officer, you know, it's like, wait, please, I need your baselines. You know, come on, that's not going to happen. You work with whatever you have, but just realize that your body language, if you're anxious, if you are suspicious, that affects the other person. That's probably even more important. Great, good set of questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. We should probably talk a little bit about, you've mentioned the face already, and I know it's certainly, as you've said, in context, it's one of many parts of the body that we need to be observing. But I know right. that you also talk about it in a little bit more detail. In fact, I've got a picture of the face here that I'll share, more about how you go about looking at the face.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I'm often asked is, okay, so how does Joe Navarro see a face? Because most people, when I was young, I was just, I would look at the face, and, in this case, I think I would be sort of bedazzled by, this woman has white hair and so forth. Or some people might look at the eyes, or some people might look at the cheeks and the lips. But as I said, they're just looking. They're not observing. The way that what we teach at the academy and what you're going to learn is how to break this down. And David, if you could click on that, when we look at someone, you learn that the first thing, you look at the whole body, you look at the face, but then we begin to break it down, such as what's on top of the hair. Has the hair been colored? Is it well groomed? Does it look like it has some sort of product that's being used? Is the hair just out of control? And if so, for what reasons? Because this often talks to us about culture. It talks to us about whether the person is having maybe mental issues, with schizophrenia. We often see very dirty hair, unkept, and so forth. We then come down to the forehead, and we look for the stress lines that show what kind of life they've had, how much exposure to the sun. We look at the temples to see if they throb, to see if they are, flush and so forth. We look at the eyes to see, are these manicured in some way? The glabella, the little area between the eyes, which we tend to furrow, which babies at 3 months recognize when someone is furrowing their foreheads. Working our way down to the nose, the nasalis muscle. How often do they pull their nose up and wrinkle it? We look at the narrow wings, the nares, and we look at, is it moistened? Is it dry? What's the color of it? Is it throbbing? And so forth, down to the philtrum, the philtral lines that often collect moisture, the shape of the lips, the cheeks, the chin. Is it dimpled down to the neck and to the throat? And you say, hey, Joe, this is how you look at me? That's exactly how I look at you. That's exactly how I look at you and the person next to you and everybody else. The first time I did it, yeah, it was a burden. The second time, it was a little less difficult. But now it's like software. It runs in the background. And once you learn how to decipher a face and say, yes, they gave us an affirmative yes on this, and then you saw the muscles of the cheek become very tight. Now we want to explore that. Did they say yes, but there's reluctance, and then that's going to come back and bite us. Once you learn how to observe the face, how to decode the face, what to get from the face, then that gives you information so that you can better interact with the person, but also so that you can cut to the chase more quickly, because if there are issues, they're going to be there. If there are cultural significance of some sort, the kind of hat they wear, how they wear their hair and so forth, maybe some of the jewelry or some of the accoutrements that is on their face. This helps us to establish more effective communication.
Great.
If you walk into a room and all you see is a face, congratulations, you're just being average. One of the things that over the years I've written about is, and in fact, my book that's coming up in July, I talk about, well, what sets exceptional people apart. And the thing that sets exceptional people apart is their ability to interpret the needs, wants, preferences, and fears and concerns of others. And then they know what to do with it. You know, a lot of people take classes in body language and they say, oh, I know when someone is showing contempt because they're pinching the corner of their mouth. That's great. Now, what are you going to do with that? Now, what are you going to do with that? Tell me, what are you going to do with that? Because if you're telling me that's what you're really good at, that you can see somebody's look of contempt, what is that demonstrating to me? The question is, and this is what the course is about, is now what do we do with that information? How do we apply that? How do we work that into communication? And I think that's what makes one of the big differences in people. The exceptional really have this gift, whether or not they can articulate it, but they sense when something is not right and they know how to address it. And or they seek at least to provide you with those preferences that will make your life, even for a moment, a little bit better. And that's why we break down the behaviors. That's why we break it down in such finite details. And that's why we spend so much time. I dare say, I mean, you guys, both Nadia and you, David, can attest to this. We probably spend as much time on the rest of the body as we do on the face, because there's so much more information that we can get from the shoulders, from the arms, from the legs, from the feet, from the skin, and so forth.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's certainly important to take that holistic approach. And as you say, to ask questions, why do we see what we see? And then what are we going to do about it? So, yeah, great advice there. Nadia, what else have we got coming in with questions?
So as we talked about baseline, it's very basic when we read body language. So it's context. And we've got a question here from Alberto. He is saying, how can I better understand context to better read body language?
Yeah, good question, Alberto. So context is very much different than baseline. And some people mix those two up. Context, you have two people at a cafe. Now we have a little bit more context. If we were to take a photograph of two hands touching, it would make a big difference if they are at a movie, if they are in public, or if they're in a business meeting. So context is that caveat, that warning that says, for us to truly understand something, the more context we have, the better. But the problem with context is temporal. And what I mean by that is this: I am affected by everything that has affected me today from the moment I woke up at 4 a.m. So from 4 a.m. to right now, everything that has influenced me is part of context. So when I was out walking my dog, if I was chased by another dog, that begins to affect me. If I've had a bad phone call, that begins to affect me. The problem is that we can never fully know contextually what happened before. So it's like when we look at a photograph, I get these all the time. Hey, Joe, would you please don't send me photographs because they won't even show them to me. Here's a photograph of myself and my boyfriend. Does he like me? How would I know? How would I know? And the reason I can say I don't know is I don't know either one of you, and I don't have context. I don't know what's behind the camera. I don't know what happened 8 minutes before the picture was taken. I don't know what happened an hour before. I don't know the luggage of life. The luggage of life is context. And there are many instances where we see something and we don't understand the context. I'll give you an example. I do a lot of work in negotiations with organizations which have a lot of history together. And a lot of times the body language that we see from, let's say, I won't give you the name, but from, let's say, a teachers union versus the state of this location, is it's not that they don't like the ideas, is that they don't like each other from things that happened 6 months ago. And that's a problem, because now I'm seeing behaviors that are related to how Bill and Jane relate to each other, which have nothing to do with what's actually being discussed. So context, I think, is I would say sometimes context is more important than baselines, because you know, a lot of times what we see on the street, especially with criminals, where as you know, in our course we talk about the famous case of Terry versus Ohio, where the guy is pacing in front of a store, but it's in the middle of the day, and then they look in through the window, then they go to the corner and they whisper to each other. And now we see, well, context, middle of the day, why don't they just go in the store? Why are they only looking through the window? And why are they whispering to each other? So context, more important in this case, and in many cases, than baselines. A great question. I see where I'm always amazed at how quickly time goes by.
Yeah. It certainly does fly. Hey, Joe, we had a bunch of questions about your background and experience as well. And one that sort of jumped out at me, she wrote in before this, and I saw she's actually posted here now. It's Karen from Texas, who's she's 60 years old. She'd love to join the FBI and is after some advice there. And she also asked about, you know, do you use your skills in everyday life? You know, clearly you use them in the FBI, but do you use them in everyday life? And what advice would you have for her and someone who's aspiring to move professionally into this sort of area?
Yeah. I mean, great questions and great topic. I would tell you this, you know, people, certainly when I went into law enforcement, you have these mythic perceptions of these people that, you know, what we see on television. If you're in law enforcement, you're a paid observer, and that's it. Yeah, you have a gun, you have handcuffs, and all that. But really, the best investigators, the best FBI agents I ever worked with were the best observers. And whether they could pick out a hair or a little tiny speck of cloth that got caught on a door that I missed, but they caught, which then showed us, you know, to the exclusion of all other clothing in this world, that little piece came from that jacket. That's what a good observer is. And that's what a good law enforcement agent is. You know, it's not about how many push-ups you can do. You know, I used to get, you know, these guys that come in, I can do 300 push-ups. That's nice. You know, if we have a contest, you'll be the winner. But can you find that little piece of material that's going to make the case? And certainly in espionage work, counterintelligence, it was something as perhaps insignificant to you, but not to me, was how much quicker this person is walking today, or that their posture is a little higher than it was the day before when he wasn't operational, or that they're walking on the outside of the sidewalk instead of the inside, and that today they're favoring the inside of the sidewalk, which tends to hide them. these are the things that make for great law enforcement. And I would tell you that if you're interested in the Bureau, then develop that skill set to where you are a world-class observer. And those are hard to come by. Those are really hard to come by. But they make the best, investigators. And as you said, David, it's a skill set, but observational skills, like any skill, have to be maintained. And that's why I always challenge myself when I go out for a walk is, can I pick up everything? Do I see everybody? Do I see all the animals? Do I see, things that are standing out? Is that car been parked here too long? Is there dirt around the tires? So now we know it's been there more than one day, and so forth. Do I do this every day? Yeah, every day. Every day, because once you learn how to read others, once you learn to observe, it's not like you turn it off. It actually makes life easier because you don't have to think about it. It's like software. It just runs in the background. And it just makes my life so much easier when I can come in and read a room. And as both of you know, I can come in and say, whoa, what's going on over here? Let's fix this right now before we get started, and so forth. So it does give you a tremendous advantage. And yeah, definitely.
And look,
speaking of advantage, before we go, because we forgot to do it well the last time, Nadia, could you, I know we have a special going on right now, and this is, I think is important because we've gone out of our way to try to make this as accessible to as many people as possible, especially with COVID and now with Easter and so forth. What are we doing for them right now that you can tell us about?
Have a special Easter discount on the Body Language Expert program for everyone who wants to be a skilled observer and read body language. We hope you will join the Academy, the Body Language Academy by Joe Navarro. So the next 7 days, we still have the Easter offer, which gives you 30% off the original price.
Okay, and that's the Easter, the code they can use to get the 1,100 plus savings.
Yes, Easter 30.
Easter 30, that's great.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. Nadia, is there, maybe we've got time for one more question. Is there one more that really jumps out at you that Joe can tackle before our time is up?
There's so many questions here.
While she's looking at that, let me say something if I could, Nadia, because some of the questions came in ahead of time. A lot of people equate body language with detecting deception, right? That's all they talk about. Body language. Get that out of your head. I don't spend 1 minute worried about that. What you should be studying body language for is, what's your best body language? Because people are reading you. What are your best gestures that you should be using? What is the best tone of voice that you should be using? What are those things that you're doing that are going to hinder you? They're going to keep you from progressing, because if you have to clear your throat every time you're asked a question by your boss, or you're biting your lips, or any number of behaviors that you might do, those things hinder you. And people are always worried about forget deception. Forget deception, because clearly, since 1986 and the work of Paul Ekman, we are no better than chance at detecting deception. And there's a lot of people out there, frankly, that are prattling that they can detect the deception. That's utter nonsense, because at best, all we can detect is maybe there's a psychological discomfort. But body language helps us to communicate more effectively, more empathetically. to realize when things are in discord, when there is a lack of harmony, when preferences, likes and dislikes are at issue. We use nonverbal communications to be empathetic. It's not about words. It's about how your body conveys a message. And I think if you're in the people business, and most of us are, that's where the efficacy of studying this comes in, that I can present better to the world, but I can also demonstrably communicate more effectively with others. And so I don't want to dissuade you from these programs if your focus is on deception. But if deception is all you're concerned about, you're hobbling yourself, because you may be a student of deception, but don't forget, people are studying you. People are analyzing you. People are determining, am I influenced by this person or am I turned off by this person? Do I feel comfortable in their presence? One of the things you learn in the seminar is two simple behaviors that you can do to increase face time. Wow. I've had salespeople tell me, I've been in sales for 30 years. I didn't know this. And if all you're concerned about is deception, you're missing out on some really powerful tools that can guarantee that person in front of you will listen to you longer than if you're doing what you're doing every day. So I hope that, those that are participating, that if you're really interested in this program was created to educate, but it was also created, and I say this without any kind of hesitation, to be transformative. But if you graduate from this program, and it's tough, anybody that's graduated from it knows it's tough. If you haven't been transformed, you haven't applied yourself. Well, first of all, most likely you can't even finish the program, because everyone that has graduated from the program that and I talk to everybody that has graduated, is they all say the same thing. It changes how I see the world. Now, how often do you hear that in a day-to-day conversation where somebody says, I did this and it changed how I view the world? It's very rare. And so I think if you do sign up for it, look at it as an adventure where you will learn both the art and the science of nonverbals, and it's a good way to grow that human skill set that we so value.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Look, I think we really are out of time now, but I know you've also got a new book coming up, Joe, that is going to be launched in the next couple of months. Is that correct?
Be Exceptional, which comes out in July. This takes everything to a new level, and people ask me, well, why did you write this? And I said, because all the other books that I've written teach you how to observe. This is the first book that teaches you how to put it all together to then use that information so that you can assess, engage, and transact. And so it brings it all together so that you can then take that information and use it to change both how you are perceived, but also how you perceive others. So it's sort of the bookend that brings it all together, in not just being able to see the pinched corner of the mouth, but then what to do with it and how to use that effectively. And I want to thank everybody for this opportunity. I know, David, it's already Monday where you're at. It's 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and I appreciate it. And Nadia, I know it's already 6 in the evening in Copenhagen. But I appreciate this opportunity to join everybody that's listening in, and it's my absolute pleasure always to share my knowledge with you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you to all our participants, and we'd love for you to see you on the course or at our next webinar. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.